Okay, the recording started. So for the recording benefit and yours, this is the PeopleImport general training session if we ever get started. We're going to be going over PeopleImport, right? So we're going to take a list and compare it against some leads and contacts and work through the different processes and talk about deduping best practices and some of our mapping types, and everything that I'm saying will start to make sense as we go through the process. So at a very high level, PeopleImport was designed to allow you to take an external spreadsheet of data and compare it to your Salesforce leads and or contacts prior to doing an import, so you're not importing duplicates. This is very much geared towards leads and contacts. It is called PeopleImport because we're focused on the person. If you're looking for a tool to just compare account information, while you can trick PeopleImport to do it, this wouldn't be my recommendation to use if you have access to demand tools. If you don't, then I will certainly send you the solution on how to trick it to just do for accounts. But it's more of a headache than necessary if you have demand tools. You're better off just learning find IDs. Because find IDs is very similar in process to PeopleImport. Also, if you don't use leads, don't worry about it. You can use this with just contacts. So it doesn't have to be both. It could be one or the other. Let's go ahead and get logged in, and we'll just continue to talk through the detail. Questions, if you guys have them, please ask them. You don't have to wait for me to ask if there's questions. A lot of times I'll stop where I think maybe I've given you enough information to let you catch up on notes and think of any questions you might have at that point, but you don't have to wait for that. As they come to you, feel free to type them in to the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. When they come in that way, I can read them out loud so everybody can have access to it and then provide the answer. All right, and if the question jumps ahead or maybe it falls back a little bit, don't worry about it. We will find a good breaking point to address the question, because I'm sure if you're asking it, you're not the only one with it on your mind. Let's get logged into PeopleImport. And you know what? I'm going to back up even further on this one. Sometimes I get told that people just don't even know where to get the application. So this is what the icon's going to look like, where my cursor's floating around. And if you want to download, of course you can go to the App Exchange. We're a partner there. But you can also go to our website, which to me is just a little bit easier. The App Exchange can get a little intimidating. There's a lot of stuff out there. And I know if I just come to our website, I can go to the download trial floating button down here, and I've got PeopleImport. Okay, keeping in mind that we have a 32-bit and a 64-bit version now. So 64-bit helps things on the computer render faster because you're just able to use more of the memory on your computer than the 32-bit would allow. That's not going to help with the processing time from Salesforce because only Salesforce can control how quickly data is processed through their API. But if your computer can handle the 64-bit, if you have the right configuration, I always use it. And you can have both installed. So if you're not sure, they install in different locations, so you can try both. And then once you download and install, you've got the icon there. And if it is 64-bit, you'll see it. It says 64-bit on the icon. Let me try to move. I can't really move that. The 32-bit, it just says PeopleImport. And then you do log in with your Salesforce username and password. Okay, you can have it remember your username if you're using the OAuth login. If you're using the API login, it'll hold on to whatever login you used last time. Okay, I like the OAuth. I just think it's a cleaner way of logging in because I toggle back and forth. I have to retype this. Hang on. A lot of people think that you have to have a single sign-on to use this, and you don't. It is what you have to use if you do use single sign-on, but it's not necessary to have single sign-on. Oh, it would help if I spelled things correctly, huh? Excuse me. All right. All right, so now you should be seeing the full screen of the PeopleImport Today page. This is the first page you see when you log on. The version is noted on the left-hand side. If you see an upgrade banner here, go ahead and upgrade. They're always free, and you always get the most up-to-date features and any bug fixes that might have been put in there. And also, as Salesforce upgrades, they change their API, so we compile on the most current API that we can get to. All right, so that's always a good thing. Just to explain a little bit about what's going on this page, you got the self-help tile that will allow you to access just the general help documentation as well as searching our knowledge base. You'll find that on our website as well. Same for the live training. It's available here and on the website, but it gives you a calendar, which I'm hoping you've seen since you're here today, of the classes for PeopleImport, Demand Tools, and Job Builder. So be sure if you have one of our other applications to join those sessions too. And then, of course, tech support. If you qualify for it, this would be the box you can click on to log a case. If you're not a tech support qualifying user and you want a recording of a training or recording of a training maybe you haven't gone to, you can always log a case for that. Okay, that's fair game for anybody. Also, if you have feature requests or feedback about the tool, right now all we have is for you to log it via a case, but we all have high visibility to that, so we'll make sure it gets routed to the proper person. So feedback is always a positive coming from you guys since you're the ones using the tool more often. We use it, but not probably quite as heavily as the next person. And then down at the bottom we have social media stuff, so our latest tweets and how to stay in touch with us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. And then of course if you need to contact us through a different way, you have the support email, the sales email, and then our phone number, which again is all available on our website. Before we jump into the details of PeopleImport, which is where we're about to go next, are there any questions? I don't want anybody starting off confused. That would be bad. And there's not a ton of people on the call today. Maybe that's due to weather. I know up here in the north we're getting hit with some snow. So, don't feel like you have to keep quiet or that you're going to hold things up. We've got 2 hours. This might take the full 2 hours. It might take an hour and a half, depending on how chatty I get. But be sure to ask the question. Even if you think it's stupid or you're asking me to repeat something I've repeated 4 times before, that's okay. That's why we're here. All right, so let's get started. On the left, we're just going to click on stage 1, and that's where it all begins. What we are asking you to do in this step is just a lot of setup, okay? Just a lot of telling the system where certain pieces between your spreadsheet and Salesforce, where they match up. First thing we need to do is tell it which spreadsheet we're referencing. On the top right, you click Select File, and you can use any sort of file type you're comfortable with, Excel, XLSX, Access, CSV, and let's see, I think I have a good one right here. If you have multiple worksheets in the workbook when you're using Excel or Access, it will ask you to select the worksheet you want to use for this process. To do that, I just double click. Okay, and it shows me the headers from that table. I can tell right now that's not the right one. So I'm just going to double click the other one, and there's the fields I'm looking for. Now you can highlight and click use, but frankly I think that use button is way too far over on the right for me to even consider, so that's why I think double clicking is just easier. If you are loading up a CSV, and let's say your CSV has some foreign characters in it, and when I say foreign, I mean foreign to the US, because that's where I am. So if you have accents and such, they will get corrupted, as CSV is not UTF-8. Check this little checkbox, and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, if you're using Excel or Access, those are UTF-8 encoded, so you don't have to worry about it there. But CSV has little nuances to it, so that's why we have that checkbox. And if you're not sure, there's no harm in just checking it anyway when you're using CSV. The next thing we have to do, well, first let's notice that in the red ink we have 3,236 records in my spreadsheet. Now we need to tell the system, are we comparing this against just leads? Are we comparing it against just my contacts in Salesforce? Or both my leads and contacts in Salesforce? For purposes of this, I'm going to do both, but understand that the process is going to be, I'm not going to say the same, similar, because if you're just doing contacts, you ignore the lead side. If you're just doing leads, you ignore the contact side, okay? So we're going to pretend that everybody uses leads and contacts. And, most of the time people use this if they have a trade show list, or maybe you were at a booth and you were scanning badges and you want to get the stuff into the system while updating the proper stuff that exists and importing the new stuff that doesn't. PeopleImport is fantastic for that. But we have to tell it what to do and how to do it before it can actually work its magic. So here, what we're expected to do is take the headers from the spreadsheet and map them to the field that they correspond with in Salesforce. So you have to think about it this way. In the event that and we don't know, we're not saying that we know what we're going to do just yet, but in the event that we update an existing record or we create a new record, where do we want the fields of information in our spreadsheet to go in Salesforce? So clearly, I want city to go to city. I want my company field to go to my company name field. Now, mine are named very similarly to my fields in Salesforce. If yours aren't, that's no problem. It doesn't matter because you can drag and drop and tell it where to go. Where it will make a little bit of a difference is if you try to use the auto map feature, because that is going to make a match based on the field name. And I'll show you that in just a second. But I want you to see that when you map a field, you get a blue flag next to it. That's just an indicator for you to know that, yes, this field has been mapped at least once. Okay, so why am I saying at least once? It's because a field in your spreadsheet can be mapped to multiple fields on the Salesforce side. For instance, phone number. Okay, I can map this to the standard phone field, but if I'm thinking, you know what, maybe this is their mobile phone, I don't know, I can map it there also. Okay, why would I do that? The reason is later on in the process, what we're doing here is setting up what we can match on. So if you are saying that you would like to compare the phone field in your spreadsheet to the mobile phone field in Salesforce, it has to be mapped. So we can do that later on in stage 3. Okay, so this is setting up everything that we're going to be able to do later in the process with the data. And you might be thinking, well, okay, if it finds a match, that's fine. I don't necessarily want to update any other fields. I just want to use it as a comparison. What you're going to notice under each of these fields is that you get to tell the system exactly what to do with it should we start processing data into Salesforce at the end. And you can say insert. So the checked for insert means yes, if I create a new lead record, I will insert this phone number into this phone field. The next 3 radio buttons deal with if we find a match to a record. You can say update the Salesforce data with what's in my spreadsheet, or do not update. Or you can say go ahead and update Salesforce, but only if that field in Salesforce is blank. So you know that you're adding data to the record instead of overwriting things. Overwriting may be what you want to do, and that's fine, in which case you would choose update. Do not update would be chosen maybe if you're just using this for comparison and you really don't want the data in your spreadsheet to overwrite any existing data in Salesforce. Okay, and again, you get to tell the system at the end, are we going to create new leads or new contacts with the stuff that didn't find a match? So we're not setting that up here, and if you're not quite sure what you want to do yet, that's okay. We're just telling what to do at a field level. And then finally, the show in grid. This one is always checked, and I always recommend keeping it checked. What this will do for you is show you in the grid the record that we match to in Salesforce, as well as the data from your spreadsheet, so you can do some spot checking. So the show in grid says, yes, if we find a match to the record in our spreadsheet, in the grid, show the record in this field of data that we match to in Salesforce. Okay, sometimes people will map over a blank dummy field in order to get that field to show in the grid, where they don't actually match on it, they don't update it, there's no data in the field, it's just a header, and they do that just so they can get data pulled into the grid when they're doing spot checking. So that's okay too. You do have access to all of your standard and custom fields. Okay, now if mapping like this is tedious for you and cumbersome, you can always click auto map. That's going to auto map both sides simultaneously if you're using both. It's still hung on to my phone mapping, which is good. So anytime you do an auto map, make sure you double check and ensure that it's putting things where you want them to actually go. Notice I am not specifying an owner. Okay, let's go back up to the owner field. I can specify owner by mapping over the owner ID, the owner alias, or the owner username. If I do not specify an owner for either side, if I create a new record, by default, I will be the owner since I'm the one logged in. And again, later on in the process, there are other options to that, okay, which we'll discuss. But without those other options, just at this stage of the game, keep in mind you will be the owner of newly created records should you not map one or select one later on in the process. Stuff that we match to, so existing data in Salesforce, the ownership isn't going to change unless you map something and tell it to update. Okay. All right, now over on the contact side, we're going to have two sets of fields here because we do not allow you to work with orphaned contacts in PeopleImport, meaning contacts that are not associated to an account. Orphan contacts in Salesforce can only really be seen by their owner, so they're irrelevant and useless, which is why we don't allow you to work with them here. So we've given you access to your contact level fields, which you're seeing here in pink, and then further down, as they turn blue, these are representative of your account fields, and you'll notice they're all prefixed with the word account. When we're mapping a field like company name or account name, you're not going to see that on the contact level because as we all know, when you're looking at a contact and you see that company name, it's showing you a field from the account level. So that's why when we're mapping that field, we have to come down to the account area and map to the account name. Okay, so keeping in mind that this is the account name associated to the contact. Okay, we're not differentiating between the account and the contact. They are seen as one entity that's tied together because they are in that master detail way. Later on in the process, if you want to say, well, let's just compare to my account and see if we can add a new contact to it, that's possible, okay? And we'll cover all that stuff. So I'm just letting you know some of the things that are coming up, but the detail is forthcoming also. Now, if you'll notice, my defaults when I map are set to insert and update only if blank. Your default out of the box will be insert and update. To change those, under options on the left, you see lead mapping default and contact mapping default. Okay, and I've just changed mine. There's another type of field in here that you're going to see, and it gives you another option called merge. Okay, you're only going to see that if the Salesforce field is long text area, multi-select pick list, or Boolean checkbox true false field. And what this allows you to do when selected is to combine what you have in Salesforce already with what's coming in from the spreadsheet. So you're not overwriting it, you're not updating it, you're concatenating the two values. The way that works with a checkbox true false field is that it will say, it will search for a true value, and if it finds one, it will keep it. If they're both false, it stays false. If they're both true, it stays true. But where there's a discrepancy, it's searching for the true value when merge is selected in order to keep that. Okay, and another thing I did over here, because I can map my fields to multiple fields, I mapped my address fields to my account, and I mapped my address fields under my contact. Okay, and again, this is just for me to help facilitate matching. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to update anything with that data. Do you guys have any questions on this so far? All right. We're probably going to reference back here a couple times, so I'll let you know when I'm jumping back and forth. Now, you can click next and move on to step 2. I like using these icons. I don't know why. I know what each screen looks like. I've been using this for 13 years, so I don't need, for you to tell me what screen it is. But for newer users, I just like clicking on the icon because then I have a better sense of where I am, I guess. Especially, if you're asking for help and we say, oh, go to stage 2 or stage 3, you have a better point of reference. What we do here on stage 2 is completely optional, by the way, but it's telling the system exactly which records in Salesforce we are going to compare our spreadsheet against. If you want to compare against all of your records, so all leads, all contacts, all accounts, that's perfectly fine, and you can skip over stage 2. For those of us who need to scale down a little bit, maybe we have too much data, maybe we're only looking to compare against a certain subset of the data, maybe I only can manage a certain subset of the data, whatever it is, you can make conditions here to tell the system exactly what records in Salesforce should be considered during this process. So for me, I'm just going to bump everything down to be seen as, or just to compare against state where it equals OH or OHIO. So my operator chose equal, but I have other options here. Exclamation point equal sign represents not equal to. And then I type in my values, which are not case sensitive. And when you want more than one value, so OH or Ohio, you separate it with a comma. Do not use spaces around the comma. Okay, so it goes against everything grammatically that we've learned, but for purposes of this statement, we have to just no spaces. And then we add the condition. I can get more granular if I'd like to, and I can also include, city equals, and add that in. Now these two conditions are anded to each other. So in order for a lead to be considered, it has to be in one of these two state variations and in one of these two cities. Sometimes I want to just OR things. Okay, so to OR these conditions to each other, I turn on expert mode, and then I get the OR grouping to the right. They still have the same OR group number, so they are still technically ANDed to each other. In order for conditions to be ORed, the number has to be different. So I can click in here and either use the directional arrows or type a 2 and click enter. Now, because they're in different group numbers, they are ORed to each other. So I will compare against leads in one of these two states or where the city is one of these two values. If you want to get rid of a condition, just click the blue box to the left and delete on your keyboard. I'm going to continue to subset the same way for my contacts and my accounts. You do not have to do that. You can subset one and not the other. They function completely independently of each other. But just for ease of use and because I know my data, I'm just going to do this. All right, so step 2, probably one of the easier steps in here because you're just telling the system, it's like writing a filter on a report. Find me stuff that equals this. And in this case, it's only compare against stuff that equals this. It's sort of like saying, here's my big pool of Salesforce data, and I'm going to scoop out into a bucket the little bits that I actually want to use for this process. Okay, and these are the buckets that they're going to fall into. No questions yet, huh? So this is either indicative of me making total sense or me confusing the heck out of you. I'm hoping it's the first, but if you are confused, I promise you won't hurt my feelings if I have to re-explain stuff. All right, stage 3. This is where we tell the system what comparison we're going to be making between the spreadsheet and Salesforce data. And we have to do it for each individual object, leads, contacts, and accounts. Again, if you're not using leads or not using contacts in this, you won't see these steps. But since I'm using all of them, that's why I'll pre-populated. So whenever we talk about finding duplicates, we always recommend a rigid to loose process. The way you have to think about this is that the steps that we're building here on the left are going to act like it says here, a filter. It's going to take everything that you have in your spreadsheet and compare it based on the parameters that I build in this step. Anything in the spreadsheet that is matched to a record in Salesforce stops being compared. And then anything else that doesn't match gets filtered down to the next step for comparison. So this supports why we tell you to go rigid to loose, because once we find a match, we stop comparing it. So you want to make sure that the match that's found first is the most rigid, the match that gives you the highest confidence level that, yes, this is a really good match. So you don't want to start off just by matching on email, right? Because, while email can be unique and that could be an okay match, if you can find the match to that record that matches on first name, last name, email, company name, phone number, you know without a doubt that that's good to go and you don't have to waste your time looking at it. So as you move further down in your steps and you start loosening things up, maybe matching on different fields or less fields or using different mapping types, you can still have good steps after that first one that still give you a good confidence level, but just match differently. And maybe towards more of the looser steps is where you'll have to step in and do some spot checking manually to ensure that you're not getting any false positives. PeopleImport's going to find, we're going to say 80% of your matches. There's probably going to be a 20% discrepancy, but that's a supporting reason why our tools work well together. Because if you had demand tools, you could use a single table dedupe and clean up whatever PeopleImport wasn't able to find for you. Let's build out these steps so you can see an example. And just keep in mind, guys, I'm not trying to tell you that this is the only way to do this. This is just what I think, again, 80% of the people could use out of the box to at least get started. So if you have custom fields you want to match on, do that. If you guys sat down and talked about your definition of a duplicate, create these steps that fall within that definition. And if you haven't had that conversation yet, it might be a good place to start to give you a good place to begin here. Okay, and of course you can modify it over time, we all do. But how I look at a duplicate based on what our business does can be very different than how you look at a duplicate based on how you guys do business. So there's no right or wrong here, it's just what works for you, what is right for you, which could be completely wrong for me, and that's okay because we all deal with data so differently. That's why when people say, what field should I match on? I can't help you there. I can't tell you. I can give you a good jumping off point, which I'm about to do now, but since I don't know your data intimately, I can't really give you an educated suggestion. But I can tell you what the mapping types mean and what they do and things to look out for. All right, let's build our step. Now, before I get into adding the conditions, the other thing you have to keep in mind, because this is a filter, is do you want to compare against your leads first or your contacts? Now, if you're just comparing against one or the other, this is a moot point. But if you're using both, you sort of have to wait for yourself. Is this more important that I find the lead record, or is it more important that I find the contact record? Because remember, after we find a match, we stop comparing. So if we find a match in the lead steps, we're not going to compare that record to find a match in the contact steps. We're not in the business of finding every match in this thing. We're just trying to find one. Okay, your existing duplicates, you got to deal with those in demand tools. I'm going to start with leads first, just because of how we nurture our stuff. If somebody comes in as a lead, I want to see their lead record now. I don't want to compare it to their potential contact record. Okay, I want to, stay on the lead side. So I will click Add Match Condition. I'm going to do that a few times because I'm going to fill in the blanks here. And when I click in here, it becomes a drop-down. And we are going to see all the fields that we had mapped in stage 1. So notice I don't have postcode. Okay, if I go back to stage 1, on the lead side, postcode was not mapped. So clearly, because there's no way for it to know what to compare it against, it's not going to show up as a match parameter. But that's okay, I don't need postcode. We're going to do company, not country. Company, and I'm going to do first name. Now, when I click in here, I can click the first letter of the word and get jumped there. So if you have a long list, that's helpful. We'll do email, and we'll do street. And if I click it multiple times, it scrolls through, okay? And I'll also do city. Oh, what the heck, we'll do state. Why not? All of these fields in this step have to match, okay? So everything in a step is anded to each other. Again, another reason why we suggest having multiple steps, because the ORing happens in different steps. So you can say, if the record doesn't match here, fine, let's take it down to step 2, which I'll have another lead step, and compare it this way. So it can match this way or the way it is in our next lead step. So you're only going to render results here where all fields that are listed match between a record in Salesforce and a record in your spreadsheet. Another thing to keep in mind, we match populated fields to populated fields by default. So not only do these fields have to match, they all have to be populated with a value. we can broaden our reach a little bit by turning on match blank. So if what we have in the spreadsheet is blank and the record that we can compare against in Salesforce is blank, we can say that yes, those two blank values for the state field, those are fine. We can consider those a match, as well as the populated field. What we won't ever do is find a blank value for a field as a match to a populated value. Okay, we don't see blanks and populated as matches. Okay, so an example of a record you'll find a match to here, where company, first name, last name, email, street, city, populated with values in both Salesforce and the spreadsheet, and state is either populated on both or blank on both. There's a little more to this, though, than just blank and populated. We have how it's going to match. Now, of course, we have an exact mapping type. Exact is 100% exact, spelling, spacing, and punctuation. If you want to do exact matches, that's fine. But we have all these other cool algorithms in here for you to use, and so maybe you want to start there. For email, I'm going to leave it at exact. I like it that way. I think an exact match on email is relevant. But we also have domain. So maybe later in the process, or even on this step, you could say, you know what, instead of matching the whole email address, I'm going to match just the domain, so anything to the right of the @ symbol. So if somebody gave you an email address of john.smith@abc.com, and then they gave you jsmith@abc.com because they had changed their email formats, the domain will still allow you to match that data because the @abc.com is still consistent. So we'll try domain there. Actually, I'll use domain on a looser match. No, I take that back. I'm going to use it here. And the reason why is because I want you to see that going a little bit looser on some of the fields is okay in a rigid step because you have these other fields to help support the match. Okay? Good question. So somebody asked, is there a list of the description somewhere? Absolutely. Everything I am telling you is in our help documentation. These guys, these mapping types, because it is good to know the definitions and be well versed with them. This little help bubble up here gives you a link to the document where that can be found. And just for ease of use, I'm going to copy out that link and put it in the chat. You should get this in the stock email I have auto-sent. I haven't looked at it in a while. I'm pretty sure that link's in there. But if not, you have it in the chat. And if you look at my help bar, I have all this stuff favorited on my bar because it's just easy to get to. And even though I've been using this for forever and a day, sometimes I have to go back and remind myself what certain mapping types do. So yeah, I was just talking about domain. There it is. Okay, it talks about how to use it with email, with website. Lots of information. Cool. All right, so like I was saying, sometimes I like to mix some looser mapping types with more rigid mapping types because I know I have the support of all these other fields that if this matches slightly loosely, I know these are matching really strongly, so that's okay. I can deviate a little bit on some of the fields. For company though, I like using the cleaned account name. This one is customizable, which is really awesome, and it references the edit account cleaning list up here. Now it goes through 3 separate functions, and I realize these tabs say replace and remove. Please rest assured we do not change any of your data in Salesforce based on these settings. This is all for analyzation purposes only. The replace tab is going to look anywhere in the string of the value. So in this case, anywhere in the string of the account name field. Where it sees a hyphen or a period or a comma, it will ignore it and see it as a blank value as well. Now you don't have to exhaustively put every single punctuation in here. We have an alpha clean engine you can toggle on, which I'll talk about in just a second. You can also do word abbreviation substitution. So ampersand is seen synonymous to the word and with a space in front and behind. Same for plus sign. A record called Johnson and Johnson can match to one called Johnson ampersand Johnson. A record called St. Jude's Hospital can match to one called St. Jude's Hospital. Please make note of the fact that these tabs are not case sensitive, and when working with words like we're doing here on Saint, do not use punctuation. So you'll notice we don't have ST period. Okay, again, the alpha clean can help clean up those punctuations, some of the replacements we've done here. And you'll always have an open spot at the bottom to make more customizations, okay? So customize this for language, locale, business industry, whatever makes sense for you. Okay, we could even do Then it moves on into the suffix and the prefix removal. Obviously, the suffix is at the end. So if there's a record called CRM Fusion Company and the one in my spreadsheet is called CRM Fusion Inc., doesn't matter. We're ignoring company. We're ignoring Inc., and we will just see them both as CRM Fusion. Now, what if one was the CRM Fusion Incorporated? One was just CRM Fusion. We're still removing Incorporated and removing the, and they're both just being seen as CRM Fusion. In addition, like I said, to the mapping types, we have these engines to the right. The one I alluded to before was Alpha Clean. When this is checked, it will only look at English alphabet letters A through Z and numbers 0 through 9. It ignores all foreign characters and punctuation. Okay. That's so for ASCII data, North American data. Transpose says that the order of the words is irrelevant as long as the words are exactly the same. A record called Salesforce Foundation and one called Foundation Salesforce can still match when transpose is enabled because they're the same words, they're just in a different order. So it transposes at the word level, not the letter level. And then, of course, we have fuzzy. A lot of people say, oh, I did a fuzzy match, and they, without any basis of really what that means, but be aware that in our tools, fuzzy has a very specific meaning. We do a metaphone, and how it does that is it removes the vowels from the word and then analyze how the consonants sound when the word's pronounced, ignoring spaces and numbers. Phonetically speaking, a record named Hewlett-Packard matches to one called Howlett-Pickard, because once you remove those vowels, the phonetics of the consonants still sound the same. My caution to anybody working with big box stores or accounts where the company name includes a number, be wary of using fuzzy on that, just because, again, it ignores numbers. So, you know, Home Depot store 123 with fuzzy turned on would match to Home Depot store 456. All right, I'm not trying to scare you away from using these things. I just want you to be very aware of what you're turning on and how it will affect your data, okay? The first time you do this, it's going to be a little bit of a process, some trial and error. You're going to have to try some stuff, get some results, and if you don't like them, come back to the drawing board a little bit, make some modifications, re-get results, and that's okay. You will find what works best for you. And over time, you'll become more comfortable with tweaking it and understanding what it does. All right, moving down for first name, we actually have one called first name. So we're going to use that. And it references this other button for the nickname list. We got this from a company who specializes in nicknaming. So if in the spreadsheet, the guy's name is John Smith, and in Salesforce, his name is Jonathan Smith. John and Jonathan can be seen the same. Ben and Benjamin, Dave and David. My daughter, Aggie and Agatha, is even in there, and that's an old name. There's one in here, and I don't know if I took it out. Okay, I don't know anybody named Peter who goes by Patrick. I just don't. So I typically remove that just because I don't want it to gum up my data. Clearly it happens because this company says it does. But if you want those out of there, just click that gray box to the left, delete on your keyboard, and then save. I obviously keep mine in so I can show you guys, but that's the only one we've come across that's really sort of weird. All right, last name. I like using exact because last names are pretty specific, but I do turn on the alpha clean. I get kind of alpha clean happy, just removing all those punctuations. And this helps for hyphenation. Okay, so if my last name was Smith Jones and I used a hyphen, and maybe in the spreadsheet I didn't type the hyphen, using the alpha clean will just ignore it, so it won't inhibit me from finding the dupe. How do you get to the list of matching names? I missed it. No problem. Up here on the top right, edit nickname list. that is what the first name mapping type reference is. Okay, so first name and edit nickname list go hand in hand. All right, for street, we have one called street address match. Wait, I might be, oh, you're welcome. And we also have one called relaxed address match. Okay. I like starting with street address. Built into that, so there's no extra button for this, but built into that one, it will see things like 123 Main Street and 123 Main Ave as the same. It's ignoring the road indicator. N and north are seeing the same, W and west, S and south, E and east. The number and the spelled out variation, first and 1ST, 1 and ONE, and so on. Okay, that's all a part of this mapping type. But you can turn on alpha clean in case there's extra punctuation. It's not going to let you turn on fuzzy because clearly on a street we don't want to ignore the numbers. That's what makes the address unique. Moving down to city, now here I do like to use exact, but again I'll turn on alpha clean and maybe fuzzy. For state, we have, you guessed it, a state match. This one's kind of cool because let's say my spreadsheet, the state was listed as OH, but in Salesforce it's OHIO. No big deal. State match can do the comparison for US states and Canadian provinces. Okay. And there's your first step. The next one's to build them, not quite as cumbersome. If you want to get rid of a condition, again, click the blue box to the left, delete on your keyboard. Just a note for anybody who might be running this like on Parallels or Boot Camp on a Mac, if you still have the Mac keyboard set up, you'll click that box and then you'll have to click Function Delete. Okay. I asked my developer to change it. I'm not sure if he did. But so if the delete alone isn't working, Function Delete will do the trick. All right. I'm not done with my leads yet, though. I mean, it's cool if things match in this step, but I'm going to do match blank on email too. But I want to keep comparing because I'm pretty sure if it doesn't match this way, we can get a looser match. I'm going to clone my step so I don't have to rebuild the whole thing. Now, put it in position 3. I want to move it up because I want it to come next. Whatever doesn't match here, I want it to fall into this step. And because I cloned it, I can make life a little bit easier on myself and get rid of some fields, change the fields, change the mapping types. Whatever it is I feel might work for my data. We'll do this. And sometimes it's just a matter of turning on match blanks too. I try not to get too exhaustive with steps, but I've seen people who have 20, 30 steps in here because they want to get that tedious with their data. If you have the time to do that, I think that's awesome. But if not, 3 or 4 per object should be sufficient. Okay, we're going to take off fuzzy. I'll try transpose. Also, don't get caught in the misconception that having all 3 of these turned on is as loose as you can go, because it's not. How the engines interact together when one is turned on with this mapping type, and it's all very different. So when you have all 3 of them turned on, it can actually be more limiting than it can be broadening. Again, it depends on your data. Okay, so this one, we'll do that. That one looks good. I'm going to clone it again. I want another step. I'm going to move it up. And we're going to get rid of these address things. And that one's fine. I'll do one more step. I lied. Let's do one more. Because sometimes people say, oh, well, I always have to match on company name. And a lot of times I don't. Company name is one of those things that people can really gum up when they're typing it in if you don't have like really strict validation rules, or if they're just not willing to go by the training you give them of, type your names in this way. So every once in a while I find it valuable just to look. I'm not saying it's always going to give you good results, but it's not worth trying to see, what results you do get. And again, if you wanted a step that just matched on email, now would be a good time to do it, because it's later on in the process where the data, hopefully we found some good matches here, but we're going to get some stragglers with the looser steps. The thing I'm going to warn you about with email, especially trade show stuff, a lot of times we'll get those generic info at crmfusion.com or sales at crmfusion.com. So you could have that on Sally Jones' record, you could have that on Kelly Jenkins' record, and then the system, if you only do an email match, could see them as a match. Okay, so my point is to not do it. My point is if you do it, just double check, do some spot checking. People oftentimes think that working with data when you have tools like this should be a very quick, no thought process, and it's just not the case. You always have to give time and thought to working with data because as we know, crap in, crap out. And we don't want to do that to ourselves or our salespeople. It happens every once in a while, but we're going to try to catch the stuff that we can. I'm going to do just another step with email. I want to see if we run into that at all. Okay. Now, we've got to go over and start doing this for our contacts. If you're not comparing as contacts, you're off the hook. You only have to do it once. And you can do the same sort of approach, but it doesn't have to be. You can do something totally different. So if how you work with your contact matches is totally different than your lead matches, that's fine. The reason this is so customizable is because we know there's no singular formula that works for data because there's too much human interaction with it. All right. I'm going to use a similar approach. Now, in here, what I want to show you, I'm looking for company name, right? When I look at my contact matching, I will also have access to the associated account fields. So in my contact match step, I'm of course saying, okay, if the email between the contact and the spreadsheet and the contact record and Salesforce matches, same for first name. But for account name, we're saying if the account name associated to this contact is the same, if that's the relationship, that's where we're comparing. So be careful when you're looking at these fields because some of them are mapped to the account. If I said billing street, it's going to compare the street in my spreadsheet to the street on the account associated to the contact. Okay, not the contact street. Right, so again, think about it with filters on a report. If you're doing account contact report, you may say, I want the contact to be in this state. You wouldn't use the account field to do that. Unless, of course, you wanted to specify that the account was in that state. So just be aware of that. We'll also do phone. Let's see here. Okay, and I'm going to throw country in here just so I can show you a mapping type. All right, so again, for email, I can do domain, I can do exact, first name. For first name, I always pretty much stick with first name, but you can always do first XX letters if you think there's some misspelling. So you can say the first 5 letters of the name I want to match on. You can also do that for the company, right? So I love clean account name, but if you want to say the first couple words or the first couple of letters, and you get to specify how many, those are pretty beneficial. One of the things I do want to show you here is that, okay, we have the clean account name, right? We know that references the edit account cleaning list button. We also have the acronym clean name. So that still references the account cleaning list button, but it takes it a step further. Once it's gone through the settings here, the replace and the removals for the prefix and suffix, it's going to acronym the remaining words. A record called the International Business Machine Company, when run through the acronym cleaned account, comes out as IBM. Because we remove the, we remove company, we're left with International Business Machines, and then we acronym it and get IBM. The acronym alone does not do the cleaning. So a record called the International Business Machine Company would just strictly acronym down to TIBMC because it acronyms all the words. It hasn't been put through that cleaning process yet. All right, so if any of you see a lot of acronyming in your names, you might want to consider those. All right, phone. We haven't talked about phone yet. I like using numeric. We also have a relaxed North American phone match. If your data is North American only, that can be helpful. But the numeric built into that ignores parentheses, hyphens, and alpha characters. And if the numbers are the same and in the same order, you got yourself a match. What I see a lot in spreadsheets is that people like to separate phone numbers with periods. A period is not a relevant character in a phone number. However, when you import that stuff into Salesforce, it will retain the periods. It's not like when you type in the UI, right? When you're typing in Salesforce and creating a record in the Salesforce UI, it'll auto-format some stuff for you. But when you're importing in, those periods are going to stay attached. So numerically speaking, a period is a relevant character if we're talking dollars and cents. So that's why it's not ignored in the numeric mapping type. But you can have the periods ignored by turning on alpha clean. For this one, I'm just, I'm doing some looser mapping types here, maybe that I wouldn't do on a real process because I want you to see and have exposure to them. The relaxed address match, and I like showing this one with a visual aid, takes the street address match a bit further, okay? So if these are all the different variations of address that you have, okay, they're all going to be parsed down and seen like this. 123 Pavilion, even though some of them had avenues, suite, floors, whatever, northwest, okay, takes it down to the most common denominator. City, we're still going to do the alpha clean and fuzzy thing with the exact, and then country, we have a country match. So the long form and the short form can match for 2-character, 3-character abbreviations in the long form. I'm going to turn on some match blanks here. All right, that's a lot of information. Any questions? You guys just need a brain break for 3 seconds? Okay. Same sort of process. I'm going to clone this, but now because I'm here, I don't have to move it. It's putting it in the right position because we will never allow you to have an account match step above these. The account match part is the secondary part to this, okay? Let's see. I'm going to get rid of, we'll get rid of phone. Get rid of all of it. And then I'll clone, and maybe on this step I take out email and I replace it with phone. You can do a lot of different things with this. It just, and I know I keep saying this, depends on your data. And for this one, I'll just do that. All right. Now, if you do something like this, first name, last name, no company information, you could match to a contact that has the same first name and last name, but is associated to a different account, okay? I don't know about you guys deal with stuff like that, like if somebody moves companies but still uses your product. For us, we keep all their interactions on that account. So we never merge or update one record. Let's put it this way, we act like they're different people because they're at different companies. So we just list them as gone so we can still see what interaction we had with them at the company. And then if you want, you can use something like the contact roll table or something, some lookup field maybe to associate the two so you know they're the same person, but just, different accounts. But again, everybody does it differently. That's just how we do it. And then finally, we can say, all right, if we don't find a match to our leads or our contacts in those 9 steps, we can do an account match and see if the company's in there. And if the company is, we'll create the person in our spreadsheet as a new contact under that account. But this is optional. You don't have to do that at all. You can say if it doesn't match, by a lead or contact, then I'm just going to jump right into the new stuff being created as a new lead or whatever. Okay, we'll talk about this in more detail in a second. I like to see if the account's there, and if it is, add the contact. Again, just because of how we work with our data. Some people nurture new people at an existing customer account as new leads because maybe they're coming for a different product, and that's fine. For us, If a person is part of a company that's already an account and a contact, they're already a customer of ours, we take the new people and just add them as contacts to the accounts. We don't want to nurture them as new leads. And you still get the rigid to loose process here. Now, here's where an ownership comes into play. If we add a new contact under an account, you can have the new contact be owned by whoever owns the account it's being placed under, instead of it being owned by me. Okay, so if I create a contact under an account that Kelly owns, I can have her absorb ownership of the contacts I put under there too. If I don't check this box, I will be the owner. For the accounts now, remember, if I don't map anything to my account fields back here on stage 1, in my blue fields, let's say I only had account name, that's all you can compare on in your account steps. Okay, and that's okay. That might be all you have. I'm not saying you have to just generically map fields to have more to match on. If it's not good data, you know what I mean, it's not helping you. But since I do have some information, I can match on a few more fields and still do that rigid to loose approach with my steps. If it's not possible for you, work with what you got. And I don't know. You know what, we'll just do that. That's fine. And I'm going to do a match blank on these guys. And we'll make this that. Billing street. I'm still going to do a street address match. So you can see after a while it just becomes like filling in the blank, figuring out what you want. And then if I wanted to do another step here where I just match an account name, I can do that. So then, exhaustively, at the end, no more matching is to be had. So the stuff that does not find a match, we have to create as new or not touch. So you can create new leads. And again, here's another ownership thing. You can invoke a lead assignment rule that you have set up in Salesforce to assign ownership to these new leads. If you do not do that, if you do not have an owner mapped on stage 1, you will be the owner of the new leads. But if you have demand tools, you can always change up that ownership pretty easily. Or you can create a new contact under a new account. You have this option here to limit new account duplicates by field. I think that's weird how we said that, but once I explain it to you, that might make more sense. This is saying that, okay, we know we're creating new accounts and contacts, right? Because the records that we're working with here didn't find a match in the previous 11 steps. But what if we have Olivia Hinkle and Kelly Jenkins both coming in as new contacts and new accounts, but they're both listed at CRM Fusion in my spreadsheet? I don't want 2 CRM Fusion accounts, one with each contact under it. I want one CRM Fusion account with both Kelly and Olivia associated because they're from the same company. If I turn on this checkbox, this gives me an area to say in my spreadsheet. Okay, so this comparison that we're going to do here is just happening in the spreadsheet. And you only get one chance at this. You don't have a rigid to loose thing. So I'm just going to do one field. I'm going to say if the company name is the same between 2 contacts coming in as new, and we'll even invoke some of our specialized mapping, then just create that account once. And anybody who matches on that name, the new contacts will just be created under that one company. You know, obviously for anything that didn't match prior to this. Okay. What else? Or you can say do nothing. The do nothing, when we get to the result grid, you don't have to process things you don't want to. You can uncheck records and say, you know what, don't process that one. So you don't have to do the do nothing here if you want to see, you know, if something would end up as a new contact, new account, whatever. You can just choose not to process those at the end. Okay. Under each step, you're going to see this option to assign to a campaign or to create a task. How do I put this? Okay, if all records, whether they are a new lead, new contact, existing contact, or a new contact or a new account, if they're all going to the same campaign, you don't have to do it under each step. You just do it once in stage 4. The only reason you would want to do them individually, like assign them to the campaign under the step, is if because they're a lead, they're going to one campaign. If they're a contact, they're going to a different campaign. But if they're all going to the same one, don't make yourself crazy by adding it in 13 times. Just do it once here in stage 4. Okay, but I do know some users who say, you know what, if it's matching to a lead, it goes to this sort of campaign because we nurture it differently, and this is what this campaign is for. If it is a new lead or a new record, it goes to this campaign because, again, we nurture them differently. But luckily, if you're like us and they all go to one campaign, in stage 4, I can make that designation here. Now, I want to be clear, stage 4 is completely optional. So is any of the extras down here under each step. If you don't use campaigns, if you have no interest in assigning tasks, skip over it and you can go and find your results. But we're going to pretend you all have vested interest in this so I can explain it to you. To assign an object, should be a record, to a campaign, you have a list of all of your active campaigns. Okay, if you're not a marketing user, if you don't have access to campaigns, you're not going to see it here. So you do have to have those Salesforce permissions. But you're assigned it to a campaign, you give the status, and we pull the status from what you have set up on that campaign in Salesforce. All right, so let's see, is this, yeah. So if you have some new stuff there, it'll show up. Now, it is possible to also grab campaign information from your spreadsheet. Some people come to me and say, look, I have a different campaign for almost every single record, okay, or groups of records, and I need to pull that campaign ID from my spreadsheet. I can't just say from a drop-down what it should be because I also have to pull the status from a field. In your spreadsheet, if you have a field that houses the campaign ID for each record as well as the status, you can tell us which field that is and pull it in. With the tasks, even if you use the campaigns, you don't have to use the tasks, okay? So you can use the parts of this page that are applicable. But you have 2 shots at a task. Now, the task default owner will be whoever owns the lead or contact. You can do overrides for that, though, because if you're thinking, well, I want all these tasks to go to my marketing person so she knows what to send out and she knows what people to work with, you can say, all right, fine, the owner for all these tasks is going to be Anya because she's our marketing person and she takes care of that stuff. Or maybe you're thinking, all right, fine, I don't mind the owner of the task being the record owner, but if the lead is owned by a queue or a group, you cannot associate, or excuse me, you cannot assign a task to a record to be owned by that queue or group, okay? Because queues and groups can't own tasks. They can own the record, they just can't own the task. So you can say if that happens, then go ahead and give the task to, and you can choose somebody. If you don't give an override, the task just won't be created. If you have contacts and leads where the owner is inactive, you can again give an override to who should own that task. If you do not give an override, the task will still be created. You will be the owner. I think, did they tell you that? No, I wish they did. I know in the help docs they do, but I wish they picked out the nuances here in the help bubble. So again, owned by queue and group, no override, no task. Owned by an inactive person, no override, still get the task. Task is owned by you. And you can have 2 tasks or 1. And this, you know, you've got your generic little drop down of these, but if you click the calendar, it shows you dates. And you can give it a status. So let's say you just want to put something in for reference purposes. Maybe it's not an actionable item. Put it in as completed, and it's going to show up in your activity history. But if it is something you need people to do, you can set a reminder and you can give it a priority. Okay, before we go into getting our results and looking at that aspect of this, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes just to see if there's any questions Maybe we need to go back over something between stages 1 and 4, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to go radio silent here for a minute just to give you a moment to think. All right, Brainiacs, looks like nobody's got questions. Awesome. I did lose somebody, though. Not so awesome. That's all right. Let's keep going because we're almost done here. Stage 5, you come here and you click Find Matches. And when it's sitting here like this, we're just waiting for Salesforce to pick up the job. This can last, 30 seconds or so. It just depends on how much API traffic is going on. And here we go. We've got kickoff, and it's going to start doing the comparison. What I should have done before I did this, just for good measure in case, I don't know, my computer crashed because it's having a bit of a rough morning, I should have saved my scenario because all that work I just did would really stink if I had to go back in and redo it because my system decided to shut down on me. So before you go to processing, if you are a better user than I am, you would click Save Scenario, and we would save it, which we're going to do here before we start looking at the results. All right. You can save this scenario at any step, okay? And let's say I'm here. It's still going to save the stuff that's in step 4, or excuse me, stage 4. When you click Save Scenario, the default is that it gets saved out on our server. So no matter where you log into PeopleImport from, home, work, you downloaded it on some random computer in a hotel because you needed to use it, you can still get to your scenarios. Okay. Now you have to give it a name, and you have to give it a category. We don't care what that name and category is. Make it something relevant to you. You're seeing 2 options here. Save scenario to server, save locally to disk. I'm going to save that to the server. If you don't see the locally to disk under options, make sure you have show, save, load local scenarios. Okay, that allows you to save it to your computer as opposed to the server. So maybe you're not done with it, you got halfway through, you don't want people using it thinking it's complete. And even though I toggled between steps after I found results, it's still hanging on to my results. If I had gone back into a step and made a change, right? If I'm like, oh wait, I actually need phone number to be updated, I'd have to come back to stage 5 and refine my matches for that to take place when I decide to process. So after you find the results, any changes you make here will not stick unless you refine your matches. Now when you come in, it's not going to be so organized. For the first time, it'll look like this. And if you look at the bottom, it says update and insert. I don't like those words because you decide if it's going to be updated and you decide if it's going to be created. Just because I matched to something does not mean it will be updated in the true sense of updating a field. So please read these as matched and new. So we matched 1,762 leads. We're not creating any, obviously because in stage 3 I didn't tell it to create any. And we matched 283 contacts. We are going to create 1,291 new ones, and you can see the numbers for accounts. In order to organize my grid, I group by step, okay? And this is the step in stage 3 that was responsible for finding the match. So I want to be clear here. There are steps inside of stage 3. That's the only place you will see a step. The rest of these are stages. Only reason I'm belaboring that is because sometimes you'll get an error message that says step 1 is blank. And you're thinking, how is step 1 blank? I'm right here. It's talking about this step. Okay, so the nuance of the word step and stage in here means something. And I just don't want it to drive you crazy. So I group by step, and here I have my final match, which in my final match, remember, I said to create a new contact and new account, but if the new incoming contacts share the same account, just create that account once and put the contacts under it. That's what's going on here. I can click on a header and it will sort by that header within the group. Okay, so if I look here, I know based on my settings that we're only going to get one of these 3 sisters accounts. And Jesse and Ben will both be contacts under that one account. Okay. Now if I smush that down, I can see here in step 1, which was my rigid lead match step, that I matched to a record. So what we're seeing here, that stuff that I'm highlighting in blue, that's the sales, or I'm sorry, that is your spreadsheet data. Okay. If I do the expansion with the plus sign, this is the record in Salesforce that we matched to. Any of the fields highlighted, for leads it'll be yellow, for contacts it'll be purple. Any of the fields highlighted means that that's a field we compared on. So if you can't remember what field you matched on in that step, look at a one that you did find a match for and you'll see with the highlighting. The alternative is to name your steps. So I could call this, you know, and just list the fields that I match on. Company, first, last, city, you know, and so on. This is another one of those things, if I want to show up in my grid, I'd have to refine the matches. But if you didn't do that, you can always rely on the highlighting to see what fields matched. And then this ID is a link to the record in Salesforce. So if I click it, it will launch me to Salesforce. If it doesn't launch you to Salesforce and brings up like a HTML view, under Options, have Use Salesforce to View Objects selected. Okay, so there's the lead that I matched against. Now, these I'm pretty confident on, right? Because that was my rigid match. Let's see. Okay, we didn't find anything. Wow. I did not find anything. That's not true. It's how it's numbered. Sorry. See how it jumps? It goes by tens? That's misleading. So here's my match step 2. Again, pretty rigid match, so I'm cool with these matches. I really don't have to go through and check because look how many fields we matched on. You know, I did match blank on street, so that's why the blank street address in Salesforce matched to my blank street address in my spreadsheet. Okay, so 3, 4, and 5 all found matches. Now step 5, I believe, yeah, step 5 was just my email match. Ooh, okay, look at this. I think, let me see here. Yeah, look at that. I left it at domain, okay? Not something you should do if you're just matching on email, because my guy up here, Alan Wong, matched to Pat Higgins because they had an @abbott.com email address. Totally not relevant. So what I would have to do is go back in stage 3, switch this to exact, and it's telling you you got to refine your matches in order for that to be referenced. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it for purposes of the process right now. And these are your contact steps, okay? So when you get a match to a contact, you have the link to the contact as well as its associated account. So the match will always be the lead or contact ID. The parent account will always be the account ID. All right, so there's that. That's a good match. Now let's look at 7, 8, 9. Okay, let's look at 10. So this was my account match step, and so was 11, where it said new contact under an existing account. So here we just matched to the account. So Jeffrey Line, again, I've got tons of him in here. Pat C. Higgins is going to be a new contact under the Abbott Laboratories account. Okay, same for the guys down here. Whoever this guy is, Kia Shields, will be under the Bentley Systems account. Okay, so while we matched to this account, are we really updating it? And the way you'll know if you're updating it is back on stage 1. Do I have any fields here set to update? Yes, we have update only if blank, so it's possible they could be updated. If they were all set to do not update, then all that would happen is the association of the contact to that account. Okay, so an update is a field level update. The association of a task or a campaign is not considered an update. Sorry, I'm just checking to see if there's any questions. All right, let's go ahead and process some of this. Now you can do an export of the data if you want to show somebody, but when you do an export, you're just going to get the IDs. You're not going to get the expansion stuff here, okay? So I can do check none, so weird, uncheck all. And I can say, you know what, just check the inserts. Just check the new ones that I'm going to put in there, and you can see the counts change based on that. Or I can say check update. I'd have to check none and then do update, okay? Or check all. I'm not going to do all these. I'm just going to do a couple from each step so you can see what's going on, but you should be aware that there are restore files in here. Under options is where you choose your restore file extension. The default is CSV, but these are your options. And you can change from process to process. You're not just stuck with it once you set it. Okay. Another thing to consider is my update insert batch size. We will process 100 records per API call. Okay, you can make this as high as 200. So if you're coming up close on your API calls, which I'm pretty good, you can say, you know what, push 200 through on each call. All right, let's do this. We're going to do these 3 sisters so you can see that just one account is created with the contacts underneath. And then we'll do an update to a lead. And if I'm testing these, I always open the record, if I can, if it's an update, in Salesforce. I'm going to close out this one. I don't know if it's the same guy. It is. That's all right. And then I will do one of these under that account. And oh, that's good. Well, I mean, updating a lead is just like updating a contact. We really don't have to do that. Now, don't forget, in my account match steps, I could have had the contact ownership match the account ownership. I didn't do that, so I will be the new owner. All right, and let's go ahead and process these. Okay. Errors are found in the input data that could cause issues. I can either check and fix the errors, or I can import with errors or cancel. I'm going to check and fix the errors. You can do this on stage 1 preemptively. Okay, so on stage 1, before moving on, I could have clicked check, and it's going to check and see if there's issues. Now, it's going to allow you to change these and fix the issues if you want, but it does not save the changes in your spreadsheet. It's just for purposes of this process. If you have a lot of these, like if I have a handful, 20 or less, I'll fix them in here. But once I start getting over 20, I'm going to use this just as a source because it tells me where in my spreadsheet the problem is, what field, and what's going on. So I can use this to guide me through fixing it in my spreadsheet. if I want. Now the issue with this is that I don't have dot in front of com. So I'm going to copy my current value, and I'm going to modify it and put the dot there. And then I'm going to update it. Let's go to the next error. Same sort of thing, except for this time we don't have an @ symbol. And we'll update. Okay? So we can do that here. If you forget to do it here, it's going to do it for you when you start processing anyway. Now, the issues also could have been on records that I'm not actually processing in this pass, but it does a sweep of the entire thing. It's not just looking at the ones that are going to be processed. Kind of wish it would, but just so you know, that's how it works. All right, one error. Errors are logged in your log file. You get one log file per day. The most recent process will be at the bottom, so it just builds on itself. And then you also have links to your restore files. We're going to look at this log file here in a minute, but I want you to take note of where these things are located. The default location is under Documents in your PeopleImport data folder, which we all have because we've installed the tool. Then we have a log file folder, and we have a restore folder. You get a restore for your leads because that's the only thing we updated. I didn't update an account. I didn't update a contact, so that's why I don't have restores for them. Had I done that, though, they would be here in that list. Okay, and then we get a final result, which is a complete dump of the grid. It looks just like the grid without the expansion info. And then you have the final raw data, which again is a dump, but there's no formatting. Okay, so the final results is formatted and looks like the grid. Let's take a look at that. Okay, and you can see the ones that we processed and the IDs and all that. The raw data could be a little bit more usable, but it's raw and ugly and there's no formatting, and we give you some extra fields in here too from the processing of CRM Fusion, like what the match key looked like per step. That's a whole lot. So all of those fields you could hide if you wanted to. And it tells you which step you found it in, and then of course it gives you the parent ID, the step that it was found in, if there was any action. Okay. All right, so let's look at my error. Now, the funny thing is I fixed this, but I did it in the check in the front. So that's why it didn't stick. Had I continued on with fixing it in the little pop-up that happened on the final screen, it would have fixed it. But I jumped back to show you where you could do it also before that portion. That's why we're still having an issue with the email. All right, so if you get it at the point where you're starting to process, make sure you work in that one for it to save. Let's go and look at what happened in Salesforce here. So the lead, let me refresh, was updated, and we should see a campaign show up as well as an activity. There's our activity. Okay, and if I open that, remember I said 60-day follow-up package, so that's there, and it gave a reminder and the high priority, so it took all those settings. And then I have my campaign history. Okay. For this guy, let me refresh. We should have a contact under it now. Bummer. Oh, that's because it was my Jeffrey, and we couldn't create him because his email address was bunk. So that's why he's not here. And then which other one did we do? Yeah, see, new contact under existing account. Oh, we did these guys. So look, this one was the new contact, new account. But because the account names were the same, I said just create it once. Look at the account IDs. They're the same, different contacts. So when I go there, one account and two contacts. And of course, we have the, if we go under the contacts, Jesse's going to have her or him, whoever it is, campaign history. and the open activity. Where are you? There it is. Same for Ben. We got the campaign and we got the activity. And you'll see that I created it today, just a couple minutes ago. Now, let's say you're like, uh-oh, I totally hosed that. I need to undo everything I did. The restore files are a start. It will undo the updates that you did to the records. But it will not remove the campaign member, nor will it remove the tasks. So you will have to run a report that shows you the campaign members that were added today by you, and then the tasks that were created today by you with that subject, so you can delete those. If you don't have demand tools, you can use the data loader to delete those from the file. Now, if you have to process a restore, I definitely suggest using Mass Effect in demand tools, but again, if you don't have that, data loader works just fine in update mode. Okay, so people get really concerned about restore files, and all it is a reverse update. That's it. But if you have questions, of course, you can reach out to us, and we'll be happy to give you a hand, because I know it can be a little bit stressful, especially because you're thinking, oh my God, how much data did I just kill? And you'll see in the status here, account inserted, new contact created, duplicate account not created, or not inserted, new contact created. So the ones that you process, it's going to give you the status. Okay, and let's go look really quickly at the restore file. So under documents, people import data. So here's the lead that I updated, and it just gives me the values of what it was before I processed. So I use, let's say, Mass Effect in update mode. I map over the ID, and I map over these fields, and it takes it back to what it was. And since I only processed one, it's only going to give me one. It's not going to give me the entire sheet. Now, these files are going to be out there, and you can do whatever you want with them. You can move them, rename them, whatever. Okay, it's entirely up to you, whatever helps keep you organized. Okay, but once they're out on your computer, we have no interest in what you're doing with them. So we just want to make sure you have your restores. All right, that is PeopleImport. What questions can I answer for you guys? And if you have any feedback about the training, if it was hard to follow, let me know. Like I said, I've been doing this for almost 10 years, so it's easy to get stuck in a rut and just continue on with the status quo. I really do respect constructive criticism, so if you wanted to email me later or send me a comment, that is perfectly fine. I just don't want to bore anybody to tears while you're sitting with me for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And I want to make it relevant. So questions about something that could be done that maybe I didn't show you, stuff that you thought was available in here that you're not seeing, or anything you may be confused on, I'm all ears. I know we're about a half hour ahead of time, but that's because you guys are a quiet bunch. Oh, awesome. Thank you, JD. Well, you have a great rest of the day, and I'm glad we ended early so you could be on the call. And I will send you a recorded version of the training. I know you have to jump out, so that's why I'm just going to log that case for you. If anybody else wants it, if you could log a case for it, that would be great. Just helps me keep track of it. Yes, great. Eva, thank you as well. All right, guys, I'm going to stop the recording.